Maya Thorne adjusted her worn backpack straps and glanced at her boarding pass one more time. Gate B17, Seat 23C. The Chicago O'Hare terminal buzzed with the familiar chaos of spring break travelers, families dragging oversized suitcases and college students clutching coffee cups like lifelines. At 22, Maya looked like any other university student heading home for a week off. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore faded jeans with a Northwestern University sweatshirt that had seen better days. The textbooks visible through her backpack's mesh pocket completed the picture perfectly. She moved through the boarding line, watching other passengers with quiet attention. A businessman in an expensive suit barked orders into his phone while gesturing impatiently at the gate agent. A young mother juggled two toddlers in a diaper bag, stress etched across her features. An elderly couple shuffled forward slowly, the woman helping her husband with his walking cane. The businessman, whose gold watch caught the terminal lighting, ended his call and immediately started another. His voice carried despite his attempt at privacy. Derek Mansion, she noted from his aggressive business card exchange with another passenger. Everything about him screamed importance and impatience. Maya reached the gate agent and handed over her boarding pass with a smile. The woman scanned it and nodded pleasantly. "Thank you, Miss Thorne. Enjoy your flight." Walking down the jet bridge, Maya felt the familiar mix of anticipation and carefully controlled excitement that flying always brought her. Other passengers saw commercial aviation as routine transportation. For her, every aircraft held possibilities and memories that she kept carefully hidden. The flight attendant, a professional woman with kind eyes and graying temples, greeted passengers at the aircraft door. Her name tag read Rosa Delacroix. "Welcome aboard Flight 447 to Denver. Let me know if you need anything during our flight today." Maya nodded and made her way toward the back of the aircraft, passing through first class where Derek had settled into his seat. He was already complaining to Rosa about the temperature, his tone suggesting that the entire airline existed solely for his convenience. "These flights are always too cold," he declared loudly enough for several rows to hear. "You people never seem to get it right. And the departure delay better not make me miss my connection." Rosa maintained her professional composure with practiced ease. "I apologize for any inconvenience, sir. We should be departing on schedule, and I will check on the cabin temperature once we are airborne." Maya found her middle seat between a sleeping businessman and a teenage girl absorbed in her phone. She stowed her backpack carefully in the overhead compartment, making sure her textbooks remained visible. The deception felt natural after 3 years of practice. As passengers continued boarding, Maya observed the crew conducting their pre-flight preparations. The captain looked experienced, probably in his early 50s with the confident bearing that came from thousands of flight hours. The co-pilot appeared younger, but competent as he worked through his checklist. Derek's voice rose again from first class. "This is exactly the kind of amateur operation I expected from a discount airline. Half these passengers look like they have never been on a plane before." His comment was clearly directed at the college students scattered throughout the cabin, Maya included. She felt the familiar sting of assumptions based on appearance, but kept her expression neutral. People saw what they expected to see, and that usually worked in her favor. The teenage girl beside her looked up from her phone. "Are you nervous about flying? Some people get really anxious, especially during turbulence." Maya smiled reassuringly. "No, I actually enjoy it. Flying can be quite peaceful once you understand how everything works." The girl nodded and returned to her screen. Maya settled back in her seat as the engines began their startup sequence. The familiar sounds and vibrations felt like coming home, even though she would never let that show. Through her window, she watched ground crews completing their final preparations. Everything looked routine and professional, exactly as it should be. Maya closed her eyes and prepared for what should be an unremarkable flight to Denver. In first class, Derek was still making demands of Rosa, his voice carrying throughout the forward cabin. He had no idea that among the college students he was dismissing sat someone whose skills far exceeded anything he could imagine. Flight 447 reached cruising altitude without incident, the aircraft settling into the steady rhythm that Maya found comforting. Around her, passengers had relaxed into their routines. The businessman to her left continued sleeping, his gentle snoring barely audible above the engine noise. The teenage girl beside her had switched from her phone to watching a movie on the seatback screen. Maya pulled out a calculus textbook, maintaining her college student facade while her mind wandered to more complex flight dynamics than anything her professors taught. The equations on the pages seemed elementary compared to the navigation calculations she performed regularly, but she dutifully highlighted passages and made notes in the margins. Rosa moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, offering drinks and checking on passengers. When she reached Maya's row, she paused with a warm smile. "What can I get you to drink, honey?" "Just water, please," Maya replied, closing her textbook momentarily. Rosa handed her a plastic cup filled with ice water and moved on to the next row. From first class, Derek's voice cut through the ambient cabin noise again. "This coffee tastes like it was brewed yesterday. Don't you people have any standards at all?" Rosa's response was patient, but Maya could detect the slight strain in her voice. "I apologize, sir. I can brew a fresh pot if you would prefer." "You should have done that from the beginning," Derek snapped. "This is exactly why I usually fly with real airlines instead of these budget operations." Maya felt irritation flare at his rudeness, but kept her attention on her textbook. She had learned long ago that drawing attention to herself rarely ended well. Better to remain invisible and let others underestimate her capabilities. The aircraft suddenly shuddered, a violent motion that sent several passengers reaching for their armrests. Maya's training kicked in immediately, her body automatically assessing the type of turbulence based on the aircraft's response. This felt different from normal atmospheric disturbance. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harrison Vale speaking," came the familiar voice over the intercom. "We are experiencing some moderate turbulence and have been asked by air traffic control to change our altitude. Please return to your seats and ensure your seat belts remain fastened." The teenage girl beside Maya gripped her armrest tighter. "Is this normal?" she asked, her voice betraying anxiety. "Yes, completely normal," Maya reassured her, though her trained ear detected subtle stress in the captain's voice that passengers would never notice. "Pilots are very conservative about passenger safety." Another violent shake rattled the aircraft, this one accompanied by a sharp banking motion that sent several unsecured items sliding across seat trays. The teenage girl gasped and closed her eyes tightly. Derek's voice boomed from first class, anger replacing his usual condescension. "What kind of amateur flying is this? I demand to speak with the captain immediately." "Sir, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened," Rosa replied firmly. "The captain is handling the situation professionally." The aircraft leveled out momentarily, giving passengers a brief respite from the turbulence. Maya noticed the flight attendants exchanging glances that suggested they were also concerned about the unusual severity of the disturbance. Then everything changed in an instant. A sharp alarm sounded from the cockpit, barely audible to passengers but unmistakable to anyone with aviation training. Maya's blood went cold as she recognized the specific tone. That was not a routine alert. Rosa rushed toward the front of the aircraft, her professional composure cracking slightly. Maya watched through the gap between seats as the flight attendant disappeared into the cockpit area. Seconds later, Rosa emerged, her face pale. She moved quickly to the intercom handset, her hands shaking slightly as she lifted it. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm and stay in your seats with seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing a medical emergency in the cockpit, and we need to know if there are any licensed pilots aboard the aircraft. If you're a certified pilot, please press your call button immediately." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Maya felt her heart racing as the implications hit her. A medical emergency in the cockpit during turbulence could only mean one thing. Either the captain or co-pilot was incapacitated. Around her, passengers began murmuring anxiously. The businessman to her left had awakened and was looking around nervously. The teenage girl was now gripping Maya's arm. What does that mean? She whispered urgently. Why do they need a pilot? Maya's mind raced through possibilities, all of them serious. She kept her voice calm and steady. Sometimes pilots need medical attention, and having another qualified person available helps with procedures. But her training told her this was far more critical than she was letting on. Derek's voice cut through the cabin noise like a blade. This is absolutely unacceptable. I have important meetings in Denver. Someone needs to get control of this situation right now. Rose's voice came over the intercom again, more urgent this time. We need any certified pilots to identify themselves immediately. This is a critical situation, and we require qualified assistance. Maya stared at her call button, her finger hovering inches away. 3 years of carefully maintained anonymity hung in the balance. Every instinct told her to remain hidden, to let someone else handle this crisis. But as the aircraft shuddered again and passengers around her grew more frightened, Maya realized that her secret identity might be the only thing standing between 247 people and disaster. Maya's finger remained frozen over the call button as precious seconds ticked by. Around her, the cabin buzzed with nervous energy and whispered conversations. Passengers craned their necks, looking for anyone who might respond to Rose's urgent plea. The teenage girl beside her was now openly crying. What happens if nobody can help? She asked through her tears. Are we going to crash? Maya squeezed the girl's hand gently. Aircraft are designed with multiple safety systems. Everything will be okay. But even as she spoke reassuring words, Maya's trained mind was calculating the grim reality. If Captain Vale was completely incapacitated and the co-pilot was struggling alone in heavy turbulence, their situation was deteriorating rapidly. Commercial pilots rarely encountered the kind of extreme emergency procedures that might be required. From first class, Derek's voice erupted again, louder and more aggressive than before. This is ridiculous. What kind of bargain airline doesn't have backup pilots? I'm calling my lawyer the moment we land. If we land. His last comment sent ripples of fear through nearby passengers. A middle-aged woman in the row ahead turned around with tears in her eyes. Please, sir. You're scaring people. Derek scoffed dismissively. Someone needs to face reality here. We are probably going to die because this cheap airline cut corners on safety. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. Derek's panic was making an already dangerous situation worse by terrorizing other passengers. But revealing herself meant exposing everything she had worked to keep hidden. Rose's voice came over the intercom again, desperation bleeding through her professional training. Please, if anyone has any flight experience whatsoever, we desperately need your assistance in the cockpit. Time is critical. The aircraft lurched violently to the left, throwing passengers against their restraints. Several people screamed as personal items scattered through the cabin. Maya instinctively braced herself correctly, her body automatically responding to the aircraft's motion in ways that civilian passengers never learned. That does it, Derek announced, unbuckling his seatbelt despite the continuing turbulence. I'm going up there myself. Someone needs to take charge before we all die. Sir, please remain seated, Rosa called out as she struggled to maintain her balance in the aisle. Only qualified pilots should enter the cockpit area. Derek ignored her completely, pushing past other passengers who were trying to help him back to his seat. Lady, I have been flying on commercial aircraft for 20 years. I think I know more about this than some college kids and housewives. His dismissive comment about college kids was clearly directed at passengers like Maya. She watched him stumble toward the front of the aircraft, his business suit wrinkled and his face flushed with anger and fear. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment, she heard her flight instructor's voice from 3 years ago during her first emergency simulation. Fear kills pilots, Maya. When lives are on the line, you set aside everything else and do what needs to be done. The aircraft shuddered again, this time accompanied by an alarming change in engine tone that made Maya's blood run cold. That sound indicated potential engine problems on top of whatever was happening in the cockpit. She opened her eyes and pressed her call button. The chime seemed to echo through the cabin as Rosa rushed toward her, hope flickering across her face. "Are you a pilot?" she asked urgently. Maya nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes, I am certified for commercial aircraft." Relief flooded Rosa's features. "Thank God. Please come with me immediately." As Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, Derek spun around from his position near the cockpit door. "What?" he demanded incredulously. "You are letting a college student into the cockpit? Are you people completely insane?" "Sir, please return to your seat," Rosa said firmly. "We have a qualified pilot now." Derek's face turned red with indignation. "A qualified pilot? She looks like she should be studying for midterms, not flying commercial aircraft. This is absolutely ridiculous." Maya gathered her courage and looked directly at Derek. "Sir, I understand your concern, but I am properly certified and trained for this situation." Derek laughed bitterly. "Certified? You probably have some basic private pilot license from a weekend course." "Lady, this is a Boeing 737 with 200 people aboard, not a tiny training plane." Other passengers were watching the confrontation with growing anxiety. The businessman who had been sleeping beside Maya stood up. "Maybe we should let her try. What other choice do we have?" "Exactly what choice do we have?" Derek shot back. "We are putting our lives in the hands of someone who looks like she just graduated high school. This is insanity." Maya felt the familiar sting of being underestimated based on her appearance, but she kept her voice steady and professional. "Sir, I understand this seems unusual, but right now the most important thing is getting qualified help to the flight crew." Rosa took Maya's arm gently. "We need to go now. Every second counts." As they moved toward the cockpit, Derek continued his protests. "I'm telling everyone aboard this aircraft that I objected to this decision. When we crash because you trusted a child with our lives, remember that I warned you." His words followed Maya as she approached the cockpit door, each syllable designed to undermine confidence in her abilities. But as Rosa opened the door and Maya saw the chaos inside, all thoughts of Derek's skepticism vanished. Captain Vale was slumped unconscious in his seat, while co-pilot Rothwell frantically worked the controls with shaking hands, sweat pouring down his face as warning lights flashed across the instrument panel. Maya stepped into the cockpit and immediately assessed the chaos before her. Captain Vale was completely unconscious, his head tilted back and breathing shallow but steady. Co-pilot James Rothwell was frantically scanning instruments while trying to maintain control of the aircraft, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The instrument panel told a story of cascading failures. Warning lights blinked red and amber across multiple systems, and the artificial horizon showed the aircraft in an unstable attitude. Maya's trained eyes quickly identified hydraulic pressure dropping, engine temperature warnings, and navigation system failures. "Who are you?" Rothwell demanded without taking his eyes off the controls. "Rosa, I told you I needed an actual pilot, not some passenger." "I am a pilot," Maya replied calmly, moving closer to assess the situation. "What happened to Captain Vale?" Rothwell's voice cracked with stress. "Heart attack, I think. He just collapsed 5 minutes ago. Everything started failing at once. I can barely keep us airborne." Maya could see that Rothwell was on the edge of panic. His hands were trembling as he tried to work through emergency procedures, but his movements lacked the precision needed for the complex situation they faced. "What is your experience level?" Maya asked, already knowing from his reactions that he was in over his head. "Regional jets, mostly," Rothwell admitted. "This is only my 3rd month on the 737. I have never dealt with anything like this before." Maya moved to the captain's seat, but Rothwell immediately protested. "No way. You are not touching these controls. I am the co-pilot, and I am in command of this aircraft." "Sir, I understand your position, but we need to work together," Maya said firmly. "What emergency procedures have you initiated?" Rothwell gestured helplessly at the instrument panel. "I tried following the checklist, but everything is failing faster than I can respond. The hydraulic system is compromised. We have lost primary navigation, and I think we might have engine damage from the turbulence." Maya quickly scanned the instruments, her military training allowing her to process information far more rapidly than civilian pilots typically could. The situation was critical but not yet hopeless, assuming they could stabilize the aircraft quickly. "We need to declare an emergency with air traffic control," Maya said. "Have you contacted them about our situation?" "I tried, but the radio system is acting up," Rothwell replied, his voice rising with frustration. "I can barely hear them through the static." Maya reached for the radio controls, but Rothwell blocked her hand. "I said no. I am not letting some college student take over my aircraft. Rosa, get her out of here and find me a real pilot." Rosa, who had been standing anxiously in the doorway, spoke up. "Sir, she says she is certified for commercial aircraft. Maybe we should listen to her." "Certified?" Rothwell laughed bitterly. "Look at her. She probably has some basic private license and thinks that qualifies her for this. Lady, this is a complex commercial aircraft with systems you have never seen before." Maya kept her voice steady despite his dismissive attitude. "Sir, I understand your skepticism, but right now we need to focus on the emergency at hand. What altitude are we maintaining?" "We're not maintaining anything," Rothwell snapped. "We keep losing altitude despite full throttle. Something is seriously wrong with the flight controls." Maya could see exactly what was wrong. Rothwell was fighting the aircraft instead of working with it, making corrections that were too aggressive and creating an unstable flight pattern. His civilian training had not prepared him for this level of emergency management. The aircraft lurched suddenly, throwing everyone against the bulkheads. Warning alarms sounded as more systems failed, and Rothwell's panic intensified visibly. "That is it," he declared desperately. "I'm putting us down at the nearest airport right now. I do not care if the runway is too short." Maya realized that Rothwell was about to make a catastrophic decision that could kill everyone aboard. His inexperience with emergency procedures was leading him toward choices that seemed logical but were actually deadly. "Sir, please wait," Maya said urgently. "An emergency landing without proper preparation could be more dangerous than our current situation. Let me help you stabilize the aircraft first." "Help me?" Rothwell turned to stare at her incredulously. "You want to help me fly a commercial airliner? Lady, I have news for you. This is not some video game or flight simulator. This is real life with real consequences." From a cabin behind them, Derek's voice carried forward clearly. "See? Even a co-pilot knows this is ridiculous. We are all going to die because you people trusted a kid playing pilot." His words seemed to reinforce Rothwell's resistance to accepting Maya's assistance. The co-pilot straightened in his seat, trying to project authority he clearly did not feel. "That passenger is right," Rothwell said firmly. "I am a professional pilot with thousands of hours of experience. I do not need help from some college student who probably learned to fly last summer." Maya watched the instruments showing their continued deterioration and realized that convincing Rothwell was taking precious time they could not afford. Every second of delay brought them closer to complete system failure. The aircraft shuddered again, this time with an ominous grinding sound from somewhere in the structure. Maya's military experience told her they had minutes, not hours, before their situation became unrecoverable. "Sir," Maya said with quiet authority, "I need you to listen very carefully. We are running out of time, and I have training that might save everyone aboard this aircraft." The aircraft's warning system screamed as Maya watched Rothwell struggle with controls that were becoming increasingly unresponsive. His civilian training was failing him catastrophically, and his panic was making every decision worse. "Sir, you need to reduce power to the number 2 engine immediately," Maya said with quiet authority. "The temperature readings indicate potential failure." Rothwell glanced at her with irritation. "Do not tell me how to fly my aircraft. I know what I am doing." But his hands were shaking as he reached for the wrong controls, about to shut down their only functioning navigation system instead of addressing the engine problem. Maya realized that his pride was going to kill everyone aboard. "Stop," Maya said sharply, catching his wrist before he could complete the action. "You are about to disable our primary navigation during an emergency." Rothwell jerked his hand away angrily. "Do not touch me. I'm the pilot in command here. not some college kid who thinks she knows better. The aircraft lurched violently as the number 2 engine began producing irregular power output. Maya could hear the distinctive sound of compressor stall, a condition that Rothwell clearly did not recognize, but could lead to catastrophic engine failure within minutes. "Your engine is stalling," Maya said urgently. "We need to follow emergency shutdown procedures immediately." "My engine is fine," Rothwell insisted stubbornly. "It is just running rough because of the turbulence." Maya stared at him in disbelief. That was not rough running. That was a textbook compressor stall that any qualified pilot should recognize instantly. Rothwell's inexperience was not just dangerous, it was potentially fatal. "Sir, with respect, that sound indicates imminent engine failure," Maya explained patiently. "If we do not shut it down properly, we could have an uncontained failure that damages other systems." Rothwell turned to face her fully, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Listen carefully, little girl. I have been flying for 15 years. I do not need some college student lecturing me about engine operations." From the cabin, Derek's voice carried forward again. "Finally, someone with sense. Do not let that kid touch anything important." Maya felt frustration building, but forced herself to remain calm. The aircraft was deteriorating rapidly, and arguing was wasting precious time. She needed to find a way to help without triggering Rothwell's ego. "What if I assist with the checklists while you handle the controls?" Maya suggested diplomatically. "That way you maintain command authority while we work through the emergency procedures." Rothwell considered this grudgingly. "Fine, but you do exactly what I tell you and nothing else. And stop trying to second-guess my decisions." Maya moved to the observer seat where she could access the emergency checklists and monitor instruments. Immediately, she could see that Rothwell was missing critical steps and making dangerous assumptions about their situation. "The hydraulic pressure is dropping below minimums," Maya reported. "We need to switch to manual reversion for flight controls." "I can see that," Rothwell snapped. "But we are not there yet. I can still maintain control with the powered systems." Maya watched the pressure gauges continue falling and knew they had perhaps 90 seconds before complete hydraulic failure. Rothwell was waiting too long to make the transition, a mistake that would leave them with no control authority at all. "Sir, the manual recommends switching to manual reversion before pressure drops below 50%, Maya said carefully. "We are currently at 60% and falling rapidly. The manual is written by lawyers, not pilots," Rothwell replied dismissively. "Real pilots know when to make these decisions based on feel, not some arbitrary numbers." Maya bit back her response. In military aviation, following procedures precisely was what kept people alive. Rothwell's cowboy attitude was exactly the kind of thinking that caused preventable accidents. The aircraft shuddered as the hydraulic system finally failed completely. Suddenly, the flight controls became heavy and unresponsive in Rothwell's hands. His eyes widened with panic as he realized his mistake. "What happened?" he demanded frantically. "The controls are not responding." "Complete hydraulic failure," Maya replied calmly. "We need to implement manual reversion procedures immediately." Rothwell pulled back on the controls with increasing desperation, but the aircraft continued its gradual descent. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled with the unfamiliar feeling of manual flight controls. "I cannot hold altitude," he admitted, his voice cracking. "The aircraft is too heavy for manual control." Maya knew that Rothwell lacked the training and experience for manual reversion flight. Military pilots practiced these procedures regularly, but civilian pilots rarely encountered them outside of initial certification training. "Sir, manual reversion requires different techniques than powered controls," Maya explained. "The control inputs need to be much larger and more deliberate." "I know how to fly manually," Rothwell insisted, but his technique was clearly inadequate for the situation. He was making small corrections that had no effect rather than the decisive inputs required. The aircraft entered a shallow dive as Rothwell fought unsuccessfully with the controls. Maya could see their altitude dropping steadily, and she knew that without proper manual flying technique, they would soon be in an unrecoverable situation. "Let me help you with the control inputs," Maya offered. Manual reversion requires specific techniques that might be different from what you learn in training. Rothwell's pride warred with his growing panic as the aircraft continued descending despite his efforts. Around them, warning systems continued their urgent chorus while the situation deteriorated by the second. The aircraft continued its relentless descent as Rothwell struggled ineffectively with the manual controls. Maya watched their altitude slip through 8,000 feet with growing urgency. At their current rate of descent, they had less than 4 minutes before they would be forced into terrain. "Sir, you need to pull back harder on the controls," Maya instructed. "Manual reversion requires at least 3 times the normal input force." "I am pulling as hard as I can," Rothwell gasped, sweat streaming down his face as he fought the heavy controls. Nothing is responding the way it should. Maya could see exactly what was happening. Rothwell was trying to fly the aircraft like it still had powered flight controls, making gentle corrections that were completely ineffective in manual reversion mode. His technique was not just wrong, it was dangerously inadequate. "The control yoke needs full deflection," Maya explained urgently. "Small inputs have almost no effect in manual mode." Rothwell attempted to follow her guidance, but his movements remained tentative and uncertain. Years of flying with power controls had not prepared him for the physical demands and different techniques required for manual flight. "It is not working," he admitted desperately. "I cannot maintain level flight. We're going to have to attempt an emergency landing immediately." Maya realized that an unprepared emergency landing with Rothwell's current skill level would be catastrophic. The aircraft was too heavy, too fast, and too unstable for a successful forced landing with inadequate pilot technique. "Sir, before we attempt any landing, we need to stabilize the aircraft in manual flight," Maya said firmly. "Let me demonstrate the proper technique." "No," Rothwell snapped. "I am not giving control to a college student. I will figure this out." But even as he spoke, the aircraft entered a steeper dive. Warning systems screamed as their descent rate increased beyond safe parameters. Maya could see that they were approaching the point where recovery would become impossible. "Our descent rate is exceeding structural limits," Maya reported calmly. "We need to take corrective action immediately." Rothwell pulled back desperately on the controls, but his technique remained inadequate. The aircraft continued diving as he fought unsuccessfully against forces he did not understand. "I need help," Rothwell finally admitted, his voice breaking. "I do not know how to fly this thing manually." Maya moved quickly to the captain's seat. "Put your hands on the controls with mine," she instructed. "I will show you the proper technique." Together, they gripped the control yoke. Maya applied firm, decisive pressure, using techniques she had learned in military emergency training. The aircraft responded immediately to her more aggressive inputs. "Feel the difference," Maya said as the aircraft began to level out. "Manual controls require full deflection and sustained pressure. You cannot finesse them like power controls." Rothwell's eyes widened as he felt the proper technique through his hands. "This is completely different from anything I learned in training," he admitted. "Military pilots train extensively in manual reversion," Maya explained without thinking. "We practice these procedures until they become automatic." "Military pilots?" Rothwell stared at her with sudden understanding. "You are military trained?" Maya realized her slip, but could not take it back now. "Air Force Reserve," she admitted quietly. "But right now I need to focus on flying the aircraft." The revelation changed everything in Rothwell's attitude. His resistance crumbled as he suddenly understood that Maya's knowledge came from advanced training he had never received. "Why did you not tell me immediately?" he demanded. "I have been arguing with someone who actually knows what she is doing." Maya maintained her grip on the controls as they worked to stabilize the aircraft. "I try to help without making a big issue of it," she replied. "But the situation has become too critical for diplomatic approaches." With Maya's guidance, they managed to arrest the descent and establish level flight in manual mode. The aircraft was still difficult to control, but it was no longer in immediate danger of crashing. What other emergency procedures do we need to implement? Rothwell asked, his demeanor completely transformed. You clearly have training I lack. Maya quickly assessed their remaining systems. We need to calculate fuel consumption for manual flight, establish communication with air traffic control, and prepare for a NOFLAP landing approach, she explained. Manual reversion affects every aspect of flight operations. Rothwell nodded eagerly, finally accepting that Maya's expertise far exceeded his own. I can handle basic aircraft control now that you have shown me the technique. What should I do first? Contact air traffic control and declare a full emergency, Maya instructed. Tell them we have complete hydraulic failure, manual reversion flight, and request priority handling for the nearest suitable airport. As Rothwell worked the radio, Maya continued monitoring their flight parameters. The aircraft was stable for now, but they still faced the challenge of conducting an approach and landing without any powered flight controls. From the cabin, she could hear Derek's voice rising again. What is taking so long? Someone needs to tell us what is happening up there. Rosa appeared in the cockpit doorway. The passengers are getting very anxious, she reported. That man in first class is making everyone more nervous with his complaints. Tell them we have the situation stabilized, Maya replied. We are preparing for an emergency landing at the nearest airport with full emergency response standing by. Rosa nodded and disappeared back into the cabin. Maya could hear her making an announcement to calm the passengers, though Derek's voice continued protesting in the background. I have air traffic control, Rothwell reported. They are vectoring us to Denver International. Full emergency response is being activated. Maya felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had stabilized the immediate crisis, but the most dangerous part still lay ahead. Maya worked methodically through the emergency procedures as Rothwell maintained basic aircraft control using the techniques she had taught him. Their altitude was stable, but flying in manual reversion required constant attention and precise inputs that left no room for error. Denver approach. This is United 447 Heavy, Rothwell transmitted. We are declaring a full emergency. Complete hydraulic failure. Manual reversion flight. Requesting vectors to nearest suitable runway with full emergency response. United 447, Denver approach. We copy full emergency. Vectoring you direct to runway 34 right. Emergency equipment is rolling. Souls on board and fuel remaining. 247 souls. Approximately 45 minutes fuel remaining. Maya coached Rothwell on the response. As they established communication with air traffic control, Rosa reappeared in the cockpit doorway, her face tight with stress. That passenger in first class is causing serious problems, she reported quietly. He is telling everyone that we are all going to die because we trusted a college student. Maya felt her jaw clench, but kept her attention focused on the flight instruments. Derek's panic was spreading through the cabin at the worst possible time. What exactly is he saying? Maya asked without looking up from her calculations. He is announcing to anyone who will listen that the real pilot collapsed, and they handed control to some kid, Rosa explained. People are starting to panic. Some are asking to speak with family members because they think we are going to crash. Maya's hands tightened on the controls. Derek's fear-mongering could cause a cabin riot that would make their already dangerous situation impossible to manage. Can you isolate him somehow? Maya asked. We need the passengers calm for the emergency landing procedures. I tried, but he keeps getting louder, Rosa replied. He says he has a right to warn everyone about what is really happening. From the cabin, Derek's voice carried clearly forward. Does everyone understand what is happening here? They have given control of this aircraft to a college student because the real pilots are gone. We are going to die because of their incompetence. Maya heard gasps and crying from passengers as Derek's words sank in. The cabin was dissolving into panic just when they needed maximum cooperation for emergency procedures. Rothwell glanced at Maya with concern. Should I make an announcement to counter what he is saying? Maya shook her head. Right now we need to focus on the approach. We can deal with passenger management after we are safely on the ground. But Derek was not finished. His voice grew even louder and more theatrical. I demand to know the qualifications of whoever is flying this aircraft. Show me her commercial pilot license right now. I want proof that she's not just some student pilot and over her head. Maya tried to tune out Derek's increasingly hysterical demands while calculating approach speeds for manual reversion landing. Without flaps or spoilers, they would need to approach much faster than normal and use only wheel brakes and reverse thrust to stop. Denver approach, United 447, requesting approach speed and runway length information. Maya instructed Rothwell to transmit. United 447, runway 34 right is 12,000 feet. Recommend approach speed 160 knots for your aircraft type. Be advised we have emergency equipment standing by and medical personnel for your incapacitated crew member. Maya made rapid mental calculations. In normal conditions, 160 would be appropriate, but without flaps, they would need at least 180 to maintain adequate control authority in manual reversion. Request vectors for long final approach, she coached Rothwell. We need extra time to configure for no-flap landing. Derek's voice erupted again from the cabin. This is insane. I'm calling the airline right now to report this criminal negligence. They're going to get us all killed by trusting someone who probably has never landed anything bigger than a training plane. Maya felt her concentration wavering under the constant barrage of Derek's accusations. She had trained extensively for high-pressure situations, but civilian emergencies were different from military operations where everyone followed orders without question. Rosa spoke up from behind them. Should I ask other passengers to help restrain him? Some of the men offered to keep him quiet. No, Maya replied firmly. We cannot have a fight in the cabin during approach. Just try to keep him away from other passengers so he cannot spread more panic. But Derek had found new audience. Maya could hear him addressing the teenage girl who had been sitting beside her. Honey, I know you were scared. That girl they put in charge is just a college student like you. She has no business flying this aircraft. We need to demand they find a real pilot. Maya heard the girl burst into renewed tears at Derek's words. The teenager had been trusting her completely, and now Derek was destroying that confidence at the worst possible moment. United 447, Denver approach. Derek's voice suddenly crackled over the radio frequency. This is a passenger aboard the aircraft. I need to report that an unqualified college student has taken control of this flight. We need immediate assistance from qualified pilots. The radio fell silent as both Maya and Rothwell stared at the communication panel in shock. Somehow Derek had accessed the passenger service interphone system and was broadcasting directly to air traffic control. Sir, you're interfering with emergency communications. Rothwell transmitted quickly. Please stay off this frequency. Denver approach, United 447. Derek continued broadcasting, ignoring Rothwell completely. The crew put a college student in the cockpit. We need you to guide us in because she has no idea what she is doing. People are going to die. Maya felt her face burning with humiliation as Derek broadcast his accusations to air traffic control and potentially other aircraft monitoring the frequency. Her professional reputation was being destroyed in real time over public airwaves. Get him off the radio, she told Rosa urgently. Find that interphone and disconnect it immediately. But the damage was already done. Derek had succeeded in undermining her authority not just with passengers, but with air traffic control and anyone else monitoring emergency communications. The radio crackled with uncertainty following Derek's unauthorized transmission. Maya could feel air traffic control's hesitation as they processed his accusations about her qualifications. Every second of doubt could compromise the coordination they desperately needed for the emergency approach. United 447, Denver approach, came the controller's voice, now cautious and formal. We need confirmation of pilot qualifications in the cockpit. Can you verify your certifications for handling this emergency? Maya felt her stomach drop. Derek's interference had created exactly the situation she had hoped to avoid. Now she would have to defend her credentials over public airwaves while managing a life-or-death emergency. Denver approach, United 447. Rothwell responded quickly. The pilot assisting us is Air Force Reserve certified for commercial aircraft operations. She has successfully stabilized our aircraft after complete hydraulic failure. There was a pause before the controller responded. United 447, we copy Air Force Reserve. Can a qualified pilot provide her military identification for verification? Maya knew that providing her military credentials over radio would expose her completely, but she had no choice. The controller needed confidence in her abilities to provide proper emergency guidance. Denver approach. This is Captain Maya Thorne, Air Force Reserve, Military ID Alpha 74 and Delta 26. She transmitted directly. I am certified for emergency procedures on this aircraft type and have successfully implemented manual reversion flight operations. The formality and precision of her military identification seemed to reassure the controller immediately. Captain Thorne, Denver approach. We copy your qualifications. Please advise your requirements for emergency approach. Maya felt relief wash over her as the controller's tone shifted to full professional cooperation. Her military credentials had restored confidence in the cockpit's ability to handle the emergency. From the cabin, Derek's voice erupted in fresh indignation. Did she just claim to be a military captain? That is impossible. She looks like she is barely out of high school. This is obviously a lie to cover up their incompetence. But Rosa had finally located the passenger interphone system and disconnected it, cutting off Derek's ability to broadcast his accusations to air traffic control. Denver approach. We require extended final approach for NOFLAP landing configuration. Maya continued her coordination. Recommend approach. Speed 180 knots with maximum runway length for landing roll. United 447. Cleared for extended final runway 34 right. Winds are light and variable. Emergency equipment is in position. Advise when ready for approach briefing. Maya began working through the complex calculations required for their emergency landing. Without flaps, spoilers, or normal braking systems, they would need perfect technique and maximum runway length to stop safely. Rothwell watched her work with growing respect. I have never seen anyone handle emergency procedures with this level of precision, he admitted quietly. My civilian training never covered anything close to this complexity. Military emergency training assumes multiple system failures, Maya explained while continuing her calculations. We practice scenarios that civilian pilots hopefully never encounter. Derek's voice continued from the cabin, though he could no longer broadcast to air traffic control. I do not care what she claims, military captain or not. She is too young to have the experience needed for this situation. We're still going to die. Maya tried to ignore his continuing accusations, but she could hear other passengers beginning to voice doubts. Derek's persistent undermining was eroding confidence throughout the cabin. Rosa returned to report on the passenger situation. Some people are starting to believe him, she said quietly. They are asking questions about your age and whether military training applies to commercial aircraft. Maya felt frustration building, but kept her voice steady. Rosa, can you ask Dr. Hendricks to help with Captain Vale? We need to know his condition for landing preparation. Dr. Hendricks had been quietly monitoring the unconscious captain throughout the crisis. She appeared in the cockpit doorway with her assessment. His vital signs are stable, but he remains unconscious. Probable cardiac event, but he should survive if we can get medical attention quickly. That gave Maya additional motivation to execute a perfect landing. Not only were 247 lives depending on her skills, but Captain Vale needed immediate medical care. United 447, Denver approach. We show you 15 miles from runway 34 right. Descend and maintain 4,000 feet. Report when ready for final approach clearance. Maya coached Rothwell through the descent procedures while monitoring their fuel consumption. They had enough for one approach attempt, but not enough for a second try if something went wrong. How confident are you about this landing? Rothwell asked quietly. I need to know whether to prepare passengers for a rough touchdown. Maya considered the question carefully. With manual reversion, no flaps, and higher approach speed, it would be challenging even with her military training. But it was absolutely achievable with proper technique. Tell them to prepare for a firm landing, but that we have the situation under control, Maya replied. I have trained extensively for these exact conditions. Derek's voice carried forward one more time. She cannot possibly know what she is doing. Look at her. She is just a kid playing soldier. We need to demand they find an actual experienced pilot to talk us down. But Maya tuned out his words, focusing entirely on the approach ahead. She had trained for years for moments like this, when everything depended on precision execution under extreme pressure. United 447, you are cleared for final approach runway 34 right. Contact tower on 118.3. Good luck. Maya keyed the radio one final time before switching frequencies. Denver approach. Thank you for your assistance. United 447 switching to tower. Denver tower. United 447 heavy with you on final approach. Maya transmitted as they established contact with the control tower. Emergency aircraft, complete hydraulic failure, manual reversion, requesting priority, landing runway 34 right. United 447, Denver Tower. You are cleared to land runway 34 right. Winds calm. Emergency equipment is standing by. We have you in sight. Maya could see the airport in the distance, the runway lights creating a welcoming path through the evening sky. But she knew that what appeared simple from this distance would require every bit of her military training to execute successfully. Approach speed 180, Maya instructed Rothwell. We need to maintain precise airspeed control. In manual reversion, we have very little margin for error. Rothwell nodded tensely, his hands gripping the controls as Maya had taught him. I can feel how different this is from powered flight. Every input requires so much more force. Maya monitored their descent rate carefully. Without the precision of powered flight controls, maintaining a stable approach path required constant attention and frequent corrections. The aircraft wanted to wander off course with every small disturbance. From the cabin behind them, Derek's voice rose again in fresh panic. Look out the windows. We are coming in way too fast. That girl is going to slam us into the ground because she does not know what she is doing. Maya could hear passengers crying and praying as they saw the runway approaching at what seemed like excessive speed. They had no way of knowing that the higher approach speed was necessary for safe control in their current configuration. Rosa appeared in the cockpit doorway again. Should I make an announcement to prepare them for landing? People are getting very frightened by how fast we seem to be approaching. Tell them we are conducting a normal emergency approach, Maya replied without taking her eyes off the instruments. The higher speed is intentional and safe for our configuration. But even as Rosa made the announcement, Derek contradicted her immediately. Normal? There is nothing normal about this. We are approaching twice as fast as usual because she has no idea how to slow this aircraft down properly. Maya felt her concentration wavering under the constant barrage of criticism from the cabin. Military operations did not include panicking civilians second-guessing every decision over loudspeaker. Altitude 300 feet, approach speed steady, she reported to Rothwell. Start reducing power gradually. We need to time this perfectly for touchdown. The runway grew larger in their windscreen as they descended through 200 feet. Maya could see the emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, their red and blue lights creating an ominous backdrop for their approach. Rothwell's hands were trembling slightly as he worked to maintain the precise control inputs Maya had taught him. I can see the runway clearly now, he reported. This looks much more manageable than I expected. Derek's voice cut through their concentration one more time. Look how low we are. She's going to hit the ground short of the runway. Everyone brace for impact because this college student has no idea what she is doing. His words sent a wave of terror through the cabin. Maya could hear passengers screaming and crying as they prepared for what Derek had convinced them would be a fatal crash. 100 feet, Maya announced calmly. Power reduction on schedule. Maintain current attitude. The aircraft was performing exactly as Maya had calculated. Her military training had prepared her for emergency approaches that civilian pilots rarely practiced, and her confidence grew as they neared the runway. 50 feet, Maya continued her steady countdown. Prepare for firm touchdown. This is going to work perfectly. But Derek was not finished undermining her even in the final moments. We are all going to die, he shouted to the entire cabin. She has brought us in too fast and too steep. Brace for a violent crash landing. Maya blocked out his voice completely, focusing entirely on the critical final moments of the approach. The runway threshold passed beneath them as she prepared for the most challenging part of the entire emergency. Touchdown, she announced as Rothwell executed the landing exactly as she had coached him. The aircraft struck the runway firmly but safely, exactly within the touchdown zone Maya had calculated. Without flaps or spoilers, they needed maximum runway length for their landing roll, but the initial contact was perfectly controlled. Deploy reverse thrust, Maya instructed immediately. Maximum braking as soon as the nose will touches down. The aircraft rolled down the runway at higher speed than normal, but Maya's calculations had been precise. They had enough runway length to stop safely even without their normal braking systems. Emergency vehicles began following them down the runway as their speed gradually decreased. Maya could feel the aircraft responding properly to their braking efforts, everything happening exactly as her emergency procedures had predicted. We did it, Rothwell said with amazement as they continued slowing. That was the most incredible piece of flying I have ever witnessed. As their speed dropped below taxi speed, Maya finally allowed herself to feel relief. They had saved all 247 lives aboard the aircraft through precise execution of emergency procedures that few civilian pilots ever practiced. United 447 Denver Tower. Outstanding job on that approach. Emergency equipment is standing by to assist. Taxi to the gate when ready. But from the cabin, Derek's voice was already spinning the successful landing to fit his narrative. We barely survived because of our incompetence. A real pilot would never have brought us in that fast or that rough. As United 447 rolled to a complete stop on the Denver International runway, emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft with practiced efficiency. Maya could see paramedics, firefighters, and airline officials positioning themselves for immediate response. That was absolutely incredible flying, Rothwell said with genuine admiration as he completed the engine shutdown procedures. I have never seen anyone handle a complex emergency with that level of precision. Maya felt exhaustion washing over her as the adrenaline began to fade. The past hour had required every bit of her military training, but they had successfully saved everyone aboard. Denver ground, United 447 is clear of the runway. She transmitted to air traffic control. We need immediate medical attention for our incapacitated captain and request maintenance inspection before any passenger movement. United 447, Denver ground. Medical personnel are boarding now. Outstanding work on that emergency approach. We have never seen manual reversion handled with such precision. Through the cockpit windows, Maya could see paramedics rushing toward the aircraft with medical equipment. Behind them, airline officials and FAA inspectors were gathering to begin their investigation of the emergency. From the cabin, Derek's voice was already holding court with other passengers. I'm telling you, we barely survived that landing. A qualified pilot would never have brought us in at that speed. We need to file complaints immediately. But his narrative was interrupted as the aircraft door opened and emergency personnel began boarding. The lead paramedic headed directly for the cockpit, while airline officials moved into the cabin. Captain Vale was quickly stabilized and prepared for transport to the hospital. The paramedic confirmed Dr. Hendrick's assessment that he had suffered a cardiac event but would make a full recovery with proper treatment. As medical personnel worked with Captain Vale, an FAA inspector approached Maya in the cockpit. Captain Thorne, I am Inspector Patricia Garrett from the FAA. We monitored your emergency handling from air traffic control. Can you walk me through your decision-making process? Maya began explaining the sequence of system failures and emergency procedures she had implemented. As she detailed the hydraulic failure, engine problems, and manual reversion techniques, Inspector Garrett's expression grew increasingly impressed. "Captain, your handling of this emergency was textbook perfect," Inspector Garrett said when Maya finished her briefing. "Manual reversion with multiple system failures is one of the most challenging scenarios in commercial aviation. Your military training clearly made the difference." The inspector's words carried clearly into the cabin, where Derek was still insisting that Maya's youth proved her incompetence. Passengers began looking confused as they heard official validation of her expertise. Rosa approached the cockpit with several passengers who wanted to thank Maya personally. The teenage girl who had sat beside her was among them, her face tear-streaked but smiling. "You saved all of us," the girl said emotionally. "I am so sorry I doubted you when that man was saying those terrible things." Maya smiled gently at the young passenger. "You never doubted me. You trusted me from the beginning, and that meant everything during the emergency." But Derek was not finished. He pushed through the group of grateful passengers to confront Inspector Garrett directly. "Ma'am, I demand a full investigation of this incident. They put the lives of 200 people in the hands of someone who looks barely old enough to drive, let alone fly a commercial airliner." Inspector Garrett looked at Derek with professional patience. "Sir, Captain Thorne is a fully qualified military pilot with extensive emergency training. Her handling of this crisis was exemplary by any standard. I do not care what credentials she claims to have," Derek insisted loudly. "Look at her. She is obviously too young and inexperienced for this responsibility. Someone needs to be held accountable for this near disaster." Inspector Garrett's expression hardened slightly. "Sir, this was not a near disaster. This was a successful emergency response that saved all lives aboard this aircraft. Captain Thorne's actions were precisely what any qualified pilot would hope to achieve in similar circumstances." An airline official approached the group with additional information. "Captain Thorne, we have contacted Air Force Reserve Command to verify your credentials and training records. Your commanding officer speaks very highly of your emergency procedures expertise." The official statement seemed to deflate Derek's arguments, but he continued protesting. "Records can be fabricated. I am telling you, no one that young could possibly have the experience claimed here." "Actually, Derek," said a new voice from behind the group, "that is where you are completely wrong." Everyone turned to see Captain Vale, now conscious and sitting up on the paramedic's gurney. His color had returned, and though he appeared weak, his voice was clear and authoritative. "I have been flying for 32 years, Captain Vale continued, looking directly at Derek. "What I witnessed Captain Thorne accomplish in that cockpit was the finest piece of emergency flying I have ever seen. Her age has nothing to do with her exceptional skill and training." Derek's face flushed red as the actual airline captain contradicted everything he had been claiming. "But she's just a college student," he protested weakly. Captain Vale smiled despite his exhaustion. "Derek, some of the finest military pilots I have known earned their wings before they turned 21. Age means nothing when someone has dedicated years to mastering their craft." Inspector Garrett nodded in agreement. "Captain Thorne's performance today will be used as a case study for emergency procedures training. Her decision-making and execution were flawless throughout the crisis." As the truth of Maya's expertise became undeniable, the passengers who had believed Derek's accusations began approaching to apologize and thank her. The businessman who had sat beside her shook his head in amazement. "I cannot believe we had a military captain sitting right next to us the whole time," he said. "You seem like any other college student." Word of Maya's heroic actions spread rapidly through Denver International Airport as passengers disembarked and shared their story. News crews began arriving within minutes, drawn by reports of a young Air Force Reserve captain who had saved nearly 250 lives during a catastrophic emergency. Maya tried to avoid the growing media attention, but Inspector Garrett approached her with an official request. "Captain Thorne, the FAA would like to conduct a formal debriefing of your emergency procedures. Your actions today represent exceptional airmanship that needs to be documented." "Of course," Maya replied professionally. "I want to ensure that any lessons learned can help other pilots facing similar emergencies." As they prepared for the official debriefing, Derek made one final attempt to undermine Maya's credibility. He approached a gathering news crew with his version of events. "That girl nearly got us all killed," Derek announced to the television reporter. "She brought us in way too fast and too steep. A real pilot would never have taken those kinds of risks with passenger lives." But the reporter had already spoken with Inspector Garrett and Captain Vale. "Sir, according to FAA officials and the airline captain, her approach was executed perfectly for the emergency conditions. Are you suggesting that professional aviation authorities are incorrect?" Derek's face reddened as he realized his accusations were being challenged publicly. "I know what I experienced. We barely survived because of her reckless flying." The reporter turned away from Derek to interview other passengers, who provided a completely different perspective on Maya's actions. "She was incredibly calm throughout the entire crisis," said the businessman who had sat beside Maya. "When I think about it now, she never seemed panicked or uncertain. She knew exactly what she was doing." The teenage girl who had been so frightened during the flight also spoke to the news crew. "She saved all of us. That man was trying to scare everyone, but she stayed focused on flying the plane safely." Rosa, the flight attendant, provided the most detailed account of Maya's professionalism during the emergency. "I have been flying for 15 years, and I have never seen anyone handle a crisis with such skill and composure. She never raised her voice or showed any sign of panic, even when that passenger was undermining her authority." Meanwhile, airline officials were conducting their own investigation of the incident. The maintenance team examining the aircraft confirmed the severity of the system failures Maya had managed. This aircraft suffered complete hydraulic failure, engine damage, and navigation system problems simultaneously, the chief maintenance officer reported to airline executives. "The fact that anyone could land this aircraft safely under those conditions is remarkable." Air Force Reserve Command contacted Maya directly to commend her actions. Colonel Patricia Westfield, her commanding officer, spoke with her by telephone while she waited for the FAA debriefing. "Captain Thorne, your performance today reflects the highest standards of military aviation," Colonel Westfield said. "The Air Force is proud of your service, and your actions have brought great credit to our reserve program." Maya felt genuine pride at her commander's recognition, but she remained focused on the investigation and ensuring that proper procedures were documented for future reference. Inspector Garrett began the formal FAA debriefing with aviation officials and airline representatives present. Maya walked them through every decision point and emergency procedure, explaining the reasoning behind each action. "Your implementation of manual reversion procedures was flawless," Inspector Garrett concluded after reviewing Maya's account. "Most civilian pilots never practice these techniques to the level you demonstrated today." The airline's chief pilot, Captain Rebecca Martinez, had flown in specifically to meet Maya. "Captain Thorne, I have reviewed your emergency response with our training department. We would like to incorporate your procedures into our simulator training programs." Maya was honored by the request, but insisted that proper credit be given to her military training. "The Air Force Reserve taught me these procedures. Any recognition should acknowledge that military emergency training prepares pilots for scenarios that civilian training rarely covers." As the official proceedings continued, Derek made increasingly desperate attempts to find someone who would validate his accusations. He approached Captain Vale, who was being prepared for transport to the hospital. "Captain, you were unconscious during most of the flight," Derek said urgently. "You do not know how recklessly the girl was flying. She put all of our lives at risk with her inexperience." Captain Vale looked at Derek with genuine sadness rather than anger. "Derek, I was conscious enough to observe Captain Thorne's work in the cockpit. Her flying was not reckless. It was precise, professional, and exactly what the situation required." "But she is so young," Derek protested weakly. "How can someone that age possibly have enough experience?" Captain Vale smiled gently. "Derek, when I was her age, I was flying cargo planes in Alaska with minimal instruments and no backup systems. Experience is not measured in years alone. It is measured in training, skill, and judgment under pressure." The paramedics began moving Captain Vale toward the ambulance, but he had one final comment for Derek. You owe Captain Thorne an apology, not continued accusations. She saved your life today, along with everyone else aboard that aircraft. As Derek watched Captain Vale being taken to the hospital, the reality of his behavior began to sink in. Around him, passengers, crew members, and aviation officials were all praising Maya's heroic actions while his accusations had been thoroughly debunked. Maya completed her debriefing and prepared to finally leave the airport. But as she gathered her belongings, Derek approached her hesitantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by obvious embarrassment. Derek approached Maya slowly, his earlier bravado completely gone. The weight of his behavior throughout the crisis was evident in his hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. For the first time since the emergency began, he seemed uncertain about what to say. Captain Thorne, he began quietly, his voice barely audible above the bustling airport sounds around them. I owe you an apology. Maya looked up from packing her textbooks back into her worn backpack. The contrast between her simple college appearance and the extraordinary heroism she had demonstrated seemed even more striking now. You do not need to apologize to me, Derek, Maya replied gently. Everyone handles fear differently during emergencies. I understand you were scared. Derek shook his head firmly. No, that is not an excuse. I was not just scared. I was wrong. I judged you based on your age and appearance, and I made everything worse by spreading panic when you needed everyone to stay calm. Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse rather than the anger and arrogance that had defined his behavior during the crisis. She recognized that this moment represented real growth for someone who had been forced to confront his own prejudices. Derek continued, his voice growing stronger as he found the courage to continue. I have been flying for business for 20 years, and I thought that made me an expert. But watching you handle that emergency showed me how little I actually know about aviation. You have skills and training that I never imagined. The teenage girl who had sat beside Maya approached them, having overheard Derek's apology. She looked at Maya with obvious admiration and gratitude. I wanted to thank you again before you leave, she said earnestly. You kept me calm when I was terrified, and you saved all of us. I will never forget what you did today. Maya smiled warmly at the young passenger. You are braver than you know. Staying calm and trusting the crew is exactly what passengers should do during emergencies. Inspector Garrett appeared with the completed FAA report and final documentation. Captain Thorne, we have finished our preliminary investigation. Your actions today will be commended in our official report, and we are recommending you for the FAA Distinguished Service Award. Maya felt honored by the recognition, but her thoughts were already turning toward returning to her normal life as a college student. The media attention was flattering, but she valued her privacy and anonymity. Inspector, I appreciate the recognition, but I would prefer to keep a low profile about this incident, Maya said diplomatically. I was just doing what my training prepared me to do. Derek spoke up unexpectedly. Captain, you should accept the recognition. What you did today was extraordinary, and people need to know that heroes come in all ages and appearances. I learned that lesson the hard way. Rosa joined their conversation, having completed her own debriefing with airline officials. Maya, the entire crew wants to thank you personally. Without your expertise, we would not have had a successful outcome today. As more passengers approached to express their gratitude, Maya realized that her attempt to maintain anonymity was futile. The story was already spreading through social media and news outlets, transforming her from unknown college student to celebrated hero. The businessman who had slept beside her during the early part of the flight shook her hand firmly. Captain, I run a technology company, and I know talent when I see it. What you demonstrated today was not just technical skill, but leadership under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Maya felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude and recognition. Throughout her military service, she had trained for moments like this, but she had never imagined that her skills would be needed in civilian life. Captain Vale, now stable and prepared for release from the hospital, returned to the airport specifically to meet with Maya before she left. Despite his recent cardiac event, he insisted on thanking her personally. Captain Thorne, he said with deep respect, "In 32 years of flying, I have never witnessed such exceptional airmanship. You saved not just the passengers and crew, but my life as well. The aviation community owes you a tremendous debt of gratitude." Maya felt genuinely moved by Captain Vale's words. His recognition as an experienced airline captain meant more to her than any official award or media attention. As the crowd of well-wishers began to disperse, Derek made one final approach to Maya. He carried himself differently now, with humility rather than arrogance. "Captain, I want you to know that this experience has changed how I see people," Derek said sincerely. "I will never again judge someone's capabilities based on their age or appearance. You taught me that expertise and courage can come from the most unexpected sources." Maya nodded graciously, recognizing that Derek's transformation was genuine. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what people are truly capable of, both good and bad. The important thing is that everyone learned something valuable today. As Maya finally prepared to leave Denver International Airport, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few hours. She had boarded the flight as an anonymous college student and was leaving as a recognized hero whose story would inspire others. The experience had shown her that her military training and civilian life were not separate compartments, but complementary aspects of who she was as a person. Her service to others extended beyond military duties to any situation where her skills could make a difference. Walking toward the airport exit with her backpack slung over her shoulder, Maya looked every bit the college student she had appeared to be that morning. But now everyone who met her knew that appearances could be deceiving, and that extraordinary capabilities often came disguised in the most ordinary packages. If you enjoyed this story of hidden courage under pressure, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part. Or if you have ever witnessed someone surprise everyone with unexpected skills when it mattered most.